Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to go over some stats in Lol Esports, and not only talk about not necessarily what players are putting up for stats, but what do the stats mean? What do these categories mean? We see that Sheep has now begun doing some stat-based stuff on their website and things like that. I've been doing stats for quite a while now. Oracle's Elixirs, GOL.GG Games of Legend is also. There's countless stats based folks around, so Sheep are certainly not the first. But a lot of people are just going to be seeing stats for the first time. I had somebody in my comment section yesterday ask what my return on investment stat was. So we're just going to go over what the basic stats are that I use for those videos and what they mean and things like that. So first we have KDA. That is kills plus divided by deaths. Now, this is a stat that is sometimes contested by folks because players can get a good KDA playing very passively, and we see that in other stats. As the stats are grouped together, you can paint a picture of what type of player a player is, and in the case of KDA, it is not a very team-centric stat. In my opinion, I believe KDA is more of a player stat. You could argue that maybe champion choice does play a role, and I think that would be very fair. But otherwise, KDA, usually the players with good KDAs are pretty good. But there are occasionally players that will have high KDAs that are KDA players, where they in the rest of the stats it looks like they are not as strong. Also, we have CS per minute. That is creep score per minute. And we see that in everybody knows what that is. If you've played League, you pay attention to your creep score. There are milestones and goals within the game that you have. Depending on what role you are, support not really so much. Jungle maybe in the early to mid game, but then in the late game, depending on meta, some junglers just don't take many resources and creeps at all. But creep score is pretty important. It's indicative of how much work a player is doing in lane. In the 1v1, are they able to take creeps or otherwise possibly take others away? And we'll talk about that. So just rules of thumb for me roughly here. Roughly, those are my benchmarks for a player. Better players usually are up here. Now, depending on meta, these numbers change. I'd argue currently it is probably more so this right now in the present meta. Mid jungle taking more resources than they were in the past, and you could argue maybe in the in the lane swap, when lane swaps are much more common than they are now, you could argue maybe that drops to 7.5. The bot lane duos with Senna bot lane, of course, that changes everything. The support is now farming, and they're not going to farm at as high of a rate. But in my opinion, this tends to be in a carry. You got carry junglers here. High resource mids there. We're seeing upwards of 10 CS per minute for some mid laners right now, and that's due to the meta. But there are some players that are below these benchmarks, and you could argue that they're probably on teams that are losing. KP. Kill participation. This is kills plus assists divided by total kills for your team. So how many kills are you getting for the team? How many kills for your team are your fingerprints on? And we could say, this stat is very team-based, and it is. You can argue CS per minute as well, depending on the meta and depending on champion selection. But kill participation is definitely the most heavily affected stat based on team. The higher you'd argue, the better, the more involved. However, you do see some great teams with KPs at 60% across the board. And that just goes to show you how skirmish heavy and strong that team is, that they're able to find opportunities in outnumbered situations and not have to 5v5. And that, will change things. What I use this stat for more so is to find out you can find out what type of player a player is, because we'll see some numbers like this, and you can argue even mid lane. So, got top, jungle, mid. Bot lane duo, I don't really include in here when I look at kill participation quite as much. Support, maybe you could argue in here. Well, let's do that. Let's do that just for the sake of it here. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, top lane, under 50%. I tend to call that a solo dolo top laner. That's more so somebody that is split pushing, trying to take the turret, not involved. Probably has TP and may get into a fight late after it's already begun, but more often than not is on a side lane in the 1v1 trying to win their matchup and take turrets and create pressure. But there are top laners with 60% KP. And we could see that player is very different than the one with the 45%, in my opinion, because the 60% indicates to me more often than not they're involved in the team's kills, where 45% is the exact opposite. And they create pressure in different ways. In the jungle role, under 70%, you tend to end up here. These numbers set greater than 70%, usually paired with a +6 CS per minute. If a team is actually effectively making things happen, a jungler that has got 6 CS per minute is probably farming their face off in the early game and into the mid game and not creating as much, and hopefully their team is creating kills in another manner. And if it's more than 70%, usually you have under 5.5 CS per minute because the jungler is gank heavy, trying to make things happen themselves. Mid lane, if it's greater than 70%, I would say that is a mid laner that's roaming, making things happen. Now we have an 8.5 CS per minute type of player. If it's greater than that, maybe the team's not fighting as much. Keep in mind, if a team is not fighting as much, then these numbers are going to be different. Like I said, it's based on the type of team, kill participation. So if a team isn't fighting very often, they're going to have both of these numbers will be big, because they're not, when they fight together, and when they're not fighting, they're farming. Support greater than 70% would indicate to me they're roaming, making things happen, similar to a jungler. We have ROI. Very simple, damage divided by gold. We've seen that before. I've been using it for quite some time, a couple months now or so. The higher this number, the more efficient a player is. However, this does not take into account players that may be playing more tanky champions, facilitators, and thus they get punished a bit by this stat. So that's something that I acknowledge, and I tried to work on and create that rating system, and I will eventually have my own. Sheeps does have things that I wouldn't include, and I have things that I would like to include on top of that. So that is what it is. But that's a stat, higher the better. More positive would be 1, in my opinion. VE. Vision efficiency. Vision efficiency is vision score divided by wards placed. Keep in mind, there are some champions that may allow a player to have a higher vision score. Ashe is a great example, because of the Hawkeye. and hawk shot and things like that. So keep that in mind when you think about vision efficiency. Also, though, we do want to compare players within a role. Are they using vision properly? Are they using effective vision? Are they wasting gold? And there is a thought process in the league community that a lot of pink wards are wasted. And personally, I think if it's properly used, then it wasn't a waste at all. It's just a matter of what's this number like. And we're finding out that the bot lane duos actually have lower vision efficiency than the other three roles. Because they use so many wards. The support uses so many wards. The vision efficiency actually isn't as strong as sometimes you'd like to think it would be. Solo kills. So solo kills to me are solo kills plus 2v2 kills. I do not find it easily to... Actually, I think I'm the only person that actually tracks 2v2 kills. I could be wrong. But in my opinion, 2v2 kills occur in lane, bot lane duos against each other. It could occur where a player gets a 2v2 kill when they're getting dove by by somebody. So keep that in mind, but I don't include 2v2 kills if it's like a fight around the Rift Herald in a 4v4, and it just so happens that the Nautilus hooked the Leona and the Draven killed the Leona, so it looks like a 2v2 kill, but it really wasn't. But if it's in lane or in the laning phase, and I will count it as a 2v2 kill. Solo kill, self-explanatory, indicative of an aggressive player. And then we have... So gold difference, CS differences. These two numbers, for me, personally, I consider the end of laning phase around when the first turret falls. The first opportunity I have to look at a scoreboard to get these numbers, I get them after that occurs. Because, in my opinion, that's when the laning phase ends. That's when teams now can more... So lane swap, maybe you put 3 players in a lane and things like that. You ARAM, mid lane, whatever the fuck you want to do. And in my opinion, that's when you'll see the matchups kind of change much more than you would otherwise. Of course, there's going to be exceptions to that rule, but I find it more telling of a matchup and when the completion of a matchup occurred. I find it more telling than a 14 or 15 minute mark. That, in my opinion, is pretty arbitrary of what the game is really giving us. Some games laning phase ends at 8.5, 9 minutes. Other games it could be all the way up to 18, 19 minutes. And gold difference to me is more indicative than CS difference. CS difference can shed some light on why the gold difference is the way it is. But gold difference is what matters in the end. Which player has more gold, and that's the player that's ahead. Maybe that player didn't get it on their own. Maybe their teammates set them up for kills. Where CS is more individual. That's you getting ahead of your opponent in lane, whether you created pressure or you're punishing. We can see sometimes where players may be, even in gold, but up 10 or 11 CS. That would tell me that the mid laner left and you punished them, took some CS in, and they may have gotten an assist or a kill or something, and then the gold ended up evening out. But otherwise, CS is a good indicator in the laning phase. But gold is what really matters in the end. So, yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Subscribe to the channel for daily League of Legends content. Follow me on Twitter. Join the Discord. Become a YouTube supporter. And hope to see you again tomorrow.